All right. We're going to go ahead and begin. We're going to begin right on time. I want to respect everyone's time. We might end a little bit early or we might end right on time, depending on how the conversation goes. But welcome to IT Hour, hosted by JumpCloud. IT Hour is an open community platform conversation around IT topics, not only about JumpCloud, but general IT and best practices and workflows. It is an open conversation, though, so do not hesitate. This is not a webinar. We have 5 slides, I think, and then after that, you're going to see my beautiful face and Kyle's on screen for the rest of the duration of the event. So feel free to participate in the chat or ask a question whenever you wish to do so. Also, you can find us hanging out in the JumpCloud Slack Lounge. If you are not a member of the JumpCloud Slack Lounge, you can easily join that by going to the domain there listed on the slide. You can also click the button directly below at the very bottom of the screen for the Slack Lounge. Great place to communicate and talk with other IT admins and find workflows and best practices and solutions to your problems. We do have 2 ways to ask a question. If you want to put it in the chat, feel free to put it in the chat. That is the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. We also have an Ask a Question button, which is at the bottom of the screen as well. You can put a question in there, and we will answer that during our talk as well. Hi, I'm Ben Garrison, technical champion and technical evangelist here at JumpCloud. I've been at JumpCloud since March of 2020. 5 years, actually probably closer to 7 years now. IT was in the military for about 15 years. I'm pretty passionate around networking systems, scripting, cloud computing. Yeah, that's me. Those are my 2 little girls. The oldest is 7, youngest is 2. I'm joined today by Kyle McKenna, who is a manager of enterprise technology at cars.com. He's been around for about 8 years in IT. He's a Mac connoisseur. He knows everything about Mac, and he's been with cars.com and Dealers Inspire since about March of 2019. So feel free to ask the questions. And with that, those are our slides. That's it. We're done. Not a webinar. So the whole point of the conversation today is we want to talk about, Kyle's experience. Kyle, we want to talk about your experience as an IT person, as an IT professional, working at Cars and prior Dealer Inspire, working at cars.com, what the IT environment was, right? What the challenges that you were facing and what your day-to-day pain points were and some of the obstacles that you had to overcome. And then just kind of the natural progression between that particular IT stack and your transition into JumpCloud, as well as the challenges and the technical hurdles and the things that you had to learn or didn't know that you had to know during that whole process. So that way other admins can kind of maybe relate and see, okay, well, we were here and we want to go there, and there's going to be a lot of hurdles within that. So I'll just kind of kick it off to you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some historical experience about where you guys came from. And then for anybody who's listening in, this is an open conversation. So we're not on an agenda. We don't have any talking points. We're just 2 guys in a coffee shop hanging out, and you're more than welcome to join in that conversation and butt in. So ask questions and participate in chat. So yeah, Kyle, how has your experience been with Dealer Inspire and that IT stack?
Well, it's been an interesting ride for sure. So when I was hired into Dealer Inspire, which Dealer Inspire is a company that, we make websites for car dealerships, and they experienced absolutely explosive growth between about 20. I mean, we're still going through explosive growth right now, but along the way, they forgot to hire an IT person. So when I walked into the building in March 2019, I was the first IT person in the company. And at that point, they had a little over 600 employees. All Macs at the time. We're still mostly Mac with a couple of caveats, but all Macs, all completely unmanaged computers. So it was kind of the wild, wild west. They kind of relied and leaned on employees with technical experience to like help troubleshoot people's computer issues. But for the most part, it was just the wild, wild west. So that was when I came in 2019. About a year prior to me starting, Dealer Inspire was acquired by publicly traded company Cars.com. And shortly after Dealer Inspire was acquired by Cars.com, this is still before I existed at Dealer Inspire, Cars.com was like, yo, you guys got to get these computers managed. And they set up a portal for existing employees to download and install Jamf. An all company email was sent out from the CTO at the time saying, hey, we got to do this. Here's the instructions. And since they didn't have an IT person or department at that time, there was nobody there to babysit the process and to make sure people were actually doing it. So I don't have any exact numbers for you, but I'll just say it's very, very low percentage of the staff at that time actually installed Jamf on their computer. And obviously there was nobody there to put Jamf on new computers. And at the time, they were hiring between 5 to 20 people a week. So
were these like BYOD devices? People were going to Best Buy and Apple and buying computers, and they're bringing them in, or were they company?
It was our HR staff who would go to the local Apple store, and they would just, walk in and say, give me all the computers you can give me. They'd at least stick to a couple different model types, so it wasn't like super saturated.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how it was. So that's kind of what I walked into.
Bless you.
Bless you. What was that where it's just like all these unmanaged computers, the Wi-Fi was terrible. There was all sorts of punch list items I had to tackle when I started. But about a year after I started is when I started to really work closely with engineers and the tech people at Cars.com. And that's when we were trying to formulate a plan to get all the computers at Dealer Inspire managed. Mm-hmm. And we started to research a couple different options, like either staying with Jamf, but at the same time, we were also looking to get out of Active Directory, and we were looking for a cloud directory service. We were looking for a IAM, like SSO provider. So we researched a couple different companies, but we eventually ended up just landing on JumpCloud. This was all like right when the pandemic hit. We were like deep into research and testing.
By this time, how many did you guys ever? So you started with Dealer Inspire, and you were the only IT person, and you had a bunch of decentralized or unmanaged devices, and hiring like crazy, rapid growth. Did you have like any other research? You had unmanaged wireless, unmanaged Wi-Fi, and did you have a bunch of other SSO applications or application like web-based applications as well, or
we're
portal?
Yeah, exactly. So like we are a Google shop, so we use Gmail, and at that time Gmail wasn't really we were just leaning on the settings on the back end of mm-hmm. Gmail. We didn't have it tied into like a bigger SSO provider or anything like that. But there were definitely some applications that Dealer Inspire employees need to access that were maintained and managed by Cars.com. So there was some SSO aspects for Dealer Inspire, but for the most part, employees were expected to memorize or keep track of probably about 8 or 9 different passwords, depending on the system that they were trying to get into. Mm-hmm. And then, if they really wanted to, they could just make their computer password the space bar a couple times. So there was a lot. There was a very big mountain to climb, to say the least.
What's that? The most secure password is the easiest one, right?
Yeah,
they'll never guess it. It's just so easy.
It would never be the word password.
It would never be space. Okay, so all right. I mean, that seems like a typical type, not a typical type, but definitely something that I think a lot of IT admins have been a part of, especially when you come into a growing company or a startup organization. That seems to be a pretty common theme. Hi.
Your assistant helping out?
Yeah, I would show her on camera, but she likes to wear her bathing suit all day long now. So so that seems to be like a pretty common thing, and definitely a challenge. And so you evaluated other vendors, you landed on JumpCloud as being, a solution for all of these types of problems.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the major hurdles at that point when you said, okay, well, we're going to focus on getting JumpCloud, or better yet, what were the reasons for deciding on JumpCloud? And then what were some of those initial hurdles that you had to overcome before you said, okay, you know what, we can go ahead and do this as a solution?
Yeah. Last summer when we were evaluating JumpCloud and we kind of jumped into a test environment, we did various things to see if JumpCloud had enough MDM functionality for our needs.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. We knew that MDM was something that was recently added for JumpCloud at the time, and that there were lots of features coming in the future. It wasn't as robust as what Jamf had to offer, but it had enough for us to decide to move forward with it. But the main attraction with JumpCloud for our organization was just the fact that, you've got cloud directory. We could work out of a hybrid Active Directory JumpCloud environment once we got everything put up there and configured correctly. There's the device management piece as well, the SSO stuff, and then also Radius things as well. So like we have all of our offices in Chicago, Naperville, and Appleton set up with Radius authentication for Wi-Fi. So it's the same SSID, same way to connect. And before that, it was kind of like, depending on the office you walked into, it could have been one of like 4 different Wi-Fi names that were different. So the main thing was like everything was like all in one, and we kind of went in with JumpCloud MDM functionality, knowing that it wasn't as robust as we wanted it to be, but knew that there would be lots of features added in the future that would help us out.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like challenges to getting JumpCloud deployed, especially during a pandemic in a remote environment, that was definitely challenging. And the way JumpCloud needs to get put on a device is pretty straightforward, and we could have done it under the hood if we had already had an MDM in place, but we didn't. So we had Cars.com does have Mac and PC users. Altogether, with both organizations combined, we've got about 1,000 Macs and about 600 or so PCs, and then 50 or so Linux users. But as far as the completely unmanaged computers, by the time we were ready to roll out, we were over 700 employees. And what we had to do is I hosted a webinar daily for about a week and a half straight to try to like get people excited to install software on their computers. I mean, it was I tried to make it as fun as possible. I mean, I was playing like music that was like fun and exciting that had jump in the lyrics to like get people excited about JumpCloud.
That's fun.
Even though people had no idea what it was, they just knew that, we needed to install it to be compliant with our OEMs and whatnot. So got a vast majority of people to actually comply and attend these webinars and follow the instructions. And then once we got through that, we kind of audited the list of people who had installed versus people who had not installed yet. And once we had a 100% installation, we made a decision that with JumpCloud, you can choose to still have a good amount of control over your Macs if you don't bind users. But we decided we wanted to go with that extra step and actually bind their JumpCloud account down to their computer. Mm-hmm. And with the Macs, you can do that with this account takeover process, which you need their home folder. You need to know what their home folder is in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I worked with some of the engineers at JumpCloud to help create some PowerShell scripts for us that we were able to automate a good chunk of that, which was great. But starting in late January, for about 8 to 9 weeks straight, we would use this script to bind and do this account takeover process with about 30-ish people a day until we just chipped away and hit 100%. The first day was terrible because people didn't know what their SSO passwords were, because they would rely on password keepers or just like native Google Chrome to remember their password. Mm-hmm. So when they went to go log out and log back in, they had no idea what their SSO password was.
It's funny you brought that up as far as like the initial onboarding. I actually just shared in the chat a Dropbox for anybody who is wanting to figure out a way to do an onboarding script. This is an internal script that Ryan Bacon has created, which is our internal. He hosts the Where's the NEK? Oh, fun fact. Kyle's pretty famous. He's been on the NEK. He's on now IT Hour, and I think he's also going to be on the CTO, right?
Yeah, there's an episode of Modern CTO podcast launching next week that I got interviewed on. So
you are famous.
I'm on a media blitz right now.
I'll need to get your autograph before you pull it. So I did post that Dropbox. So if you are curious about how Ryan Bacon, who's our IT support manager here at JumpCloud, this one it'll actually run some GAM commands, that kind of stuff. So while we're talking about onboarding and scripting, that's kind of gives you an idea of what we can do. So you were doing these weekly webinars. That sounds painful.
It was, but it was much needed. I mean, it's kind of looking back, it's kind of weird to think that we used to operate with these computers being completely like off the grid. Mm-hmm. And now, we are able to, when somebody puts in a ticket, we're able to see something see things like when the last time their computer was rebooted, because it's always like a laughable thing in the IT world, but rebooting your computer tends to fix a lot of issues. So if somebody puts in a ticket and says their computer's acting up, and we look in the back end of our MDM, which is JumpCloud, and see that the last time they rebooted their computer was 236 days ago, then, guess what step one of troubleshooting is going to be?
Did you turn it off and back on? God.
No, it fixed it. Wow, thanks. You're a genius.
You are amazing. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. What was during the onboarding process of JumpCloud, or even before that, like dealing with unmanaged devices and then transitioning to managed devices? What was the one thing that, or a handful of things that you feel, or that you can remember that you had to kind of like either learn or relearn or investigate and research a little bit more before moving on to the next step? Because I think that's where a lot of IT admins get kind of in any integration or implementation, right? They kind of get stuck in, well, what should I actually know before getting into it? And then if you had any resources or tools that you used a lot to lean on to kind of help you during that process of planning or even your phases, what did those look like?
As far as things that I definitely have dusted off or like gotten a little bit more deep in the last year, learning like really basic scripting commands. I'm not a coder by any means, but I know how to Google things, and the age-old joke of like copying and pasting other people's work. Because one huge thing that helps speed up our onboarding process for new hires, when my team is setting up laptops for new hires, for Macs at least, once we get into the desktop of the computer, we just run an onboarding command that does the rest of the work for us, and that during any given week, that saves us hours of manual labor of downloading and installing the company's like essential applications, doing things like installing a local admin account and their endpoint security protection stuff. But the other big thing that we had to consider when we were moving into an MDM environment was trying to figure out things like security policies for the machines. So things like how long before the computer screensaver is going to turn on, or like, are you going to allow people to use Touch ID on their Macs, or other things like blocking iCloud Drive on a Mac. Luckily we have a security team. I realize we're lucky in the sense that not all organizations have security teams, but we kind of laid out all the policies that JumpCloud had to offer for Mac and Windows. And we just kind of we got a little committee together and we just went through everything column by column. And it's like, okay, what about this? Let's talk about this. Yes, no, maybe. So it was a group effort. But the other piece of that was that when we pushed down those policies, is that all these people that for years had been maybe saving company files to their iCloud Drive on accident, they didn't even know it. Now iCloud Drive is not an option anymore. Mm-hmm. I put together a document that pretty much went over like, cool, you got JumpCloud on your computer. Here's some things that you can expect that are going to change. And so that kind of, it rubbed some people the wrong way that now their computer had some like rules around them. But I think most people, for the most part, understood the why behind it. But putting together a document to kind of show people like what to expect after these security policies got put in place was a big help for sure.
Yeah. What were some of the most significant policies, right? That were like your immediate, like, we're going to get this on the machines, and then immediately these policies have to be on the machines. And then what were the driving factors? Was it compliance? Was it a security standpoint?
One of at least the two biggest things I actually already mentioned, that we got tickets from our end users, because people were confused or frustrated. But the iCloud Drive example was a big one. We do allow people to sign into iCloud on their Macs if they want to, for like some limited functionality. We don't open the floodgates for everything. But the iCloud Drive one, because if you log into a Mac in iCloud by default, unless you go in and disable it, it's going to take anything that you put on your desktop and put it in your iCloud Drive. And, probably 90+% of people that do that have no clue that that's even happening. So that was a big one, turning that off. We got a lot of people that complained about that, but after, sharing the document with them and telling them like the why behind it, people understood, oh, right, I probably shouldn't be saving like company finance Excel documents to my personal iCloud Drive. That was a big one. And then the screensaver one, I kind of laugh at that one, but before people could just have their computers open all day and it wouldn't go to sleep, or the screen wouldn't lock or go to screensaver or anything.
Mhm.
So people were used to that behavior. So that was a big like forward facing change that
Yeah.
people noticed right away, was that, wait a second, my computer didn't like lock itself after 10 minutes. Like, what's going on? And again, just telling people, like reminding people why. And a lot of people were like, well, I'm working at my house now. Like, who cares? But it's like, I don't know how many troubleshooting calls that I got on Zoom that people were actually like working at a bar or something
Yeah.
like that, where it's like,
Yeah. Or
well,
Starbucks.
or Starbucks.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you're working remote, but that almost makes it even more unsecure, because
We're not within our four walls of safety right now, right? You're basically just anywhere that you want to be. I'm sorry, like that's that's probably more of a security risk than anything. So
yeah, exactly. So that was definitely a big one, and we've utilized like the Big Sur block a couple of times because of like incompatibility with our current like VPN software, things like that. So we've just, we get some tickets with people wondering, why is this blocked? But other than that, it was pretty much smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And all the Windows users in the org, their devices were bound to Active Directory prior to JumpCloud.
Okay.
So that user base was already like, they were adapted and they understood these like policies. And when we migrated them over from Active Directory to JumpCloud managed devices, the policies that were put in place were pretty much mirrored what we had already.
Yeah.
I don't think there was too much of a difference, if that makes sense. So there was, from like a behavior change perspective, the Windows users never really complained about
not too much of an issue.
policies.
What was that experience like from? Because that was a big. I remember when I was on the implementation team. So that's what I did with JumpCloud when I first started. Was on the implementation side. I remember the biggest thing, especially because I was the first remote employee class, right? So I started remote here at JumpCloud. I was supposed to be in the office in Louisville, Colorado, but I got an email saying that we're going to do remote onboarding, and I just never been to the office since. So, but I remember being on calls, and like the biggest pain point for admins were there was Active Directory, they were remote, right? So all the AD remote issues was a problem as well. But then also we had to convert those machines from being AD bound to local profiles. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We do have plans to allow the agent to run on AD bound machines, just not manage the identity here pretty soon. But what was that experience like, and what was some of your major either resource hurdles, right? Or just logistic hurdles when it came to migrating from an AD bound machine to a local profile, and had you overcome it?
I wasn't personally the one doing that, and I'm not really a Windows guy per se, but I was familiar with what was going on. So being in the remote environment, again, we did have to have, we relied on people being connected to VPN in order for them to like drop their current computer off the domain and then migrate them over to JumpCloud managed device. So our desktop engineer that was overseeing that and in charge of that and doing it would get groups of 10 to 20 users and, utilize email and Slack to remind them that, hey, make sure your computer is connected to power, internet, and you're connected to VPN at this time on this date. And then just like, let me do my thing, and then kind of go from there. So there were always issues with people not being able to attend due to like family stuff or other like work emergencies. So I don't want to say that was a harder transition from binding people on the Mac side But it was definitely challenging being in a remote environment. And a lot of that kind of is the theme of what I'm saying. Because if everybody was in office, like all this stuff I'm talking about would have just been like exponentially easier, if that makes sense, because you wouldn't have to worry about VPN, and you could obviously just be there with them for when they have questions, comments, concerns, don't know how to do something, or if they don't know their password, kind of a thing.
Well, for 1,600 people, I could see that being a long transition period. It's interesting that you brought up, I was thinking back to a time when I was an IT manager, right? We had similar, but we didn't have those policies. We had Jamf, right? We had an MDM in place, right? But we weren't really locking down the machine fully because certain individuals within the organization wanted to work a certain way, right? And one of the things that came up was Messenger, right, on the Mac. And we found that a lot of people were using Messenger, their personal messenger, on their computer. And then we also found there were some people who were transferring files like, hey, we look at this agreement from their computer in Messenger from one person to another. So just kind of going back off of like, we brought in a risk compliance and a CISP person, and when they found that out, they pretty much pulled their hair out immediately.
You talking about like the iMessage app on there that allows you to text message people?
Yeah.
So we're lucky enough. I don't know if I should say lucky or unlucky, but we do allow people to use that because people use it to just get work done.
Yeah.
And that would have been a really tough one to take away from people, especially since they had like business cases to keep it like, I'm like, you know, people saying like, because initially when we try to listen to end user feedback, because initially when we rolled out JumpCloud, we had a block for iCloud contacts in place. And when we did that, you know, these people would open up their little iMessage app and they'd just see phone numbers all of a sudden. And they were like, wait a second, like, where'd all my contacts go? Like, I use this for work. And, you know, part of me is like, well, should you really be using like your personal cell phone number to get work done? But the other part of me is like, you know, everybody's different. And especially some of the salespeople out there, who are under like a lot of different pressure to close deals and whatnot, tend to give out their cell phone numbers. So I think that was a good example of kind of us listening to like people making arguments to change policies and us actually like being like, you know what, that's a good point. We'll allow it.
Yeah. And that's a good point, right? So like my experience, I came from a fintech, right, organization that was, you know, locked down by a lot of, you know, policies and compliance rules, right, where data discovery and liability, like if they went on a legal hold and they could basically go and take your personal cell phone away from you, right, on certain cases and certain lawsuits or whatever came up in court. Those are things to take into consideration, as well as like, you know, your organization may not have that. So obviously that's a really good way to work. I agree. iMessage is great. I love it. But those are things that I think that are fantastic. And those are the ones that I think when admins roll out policies and security, you know, steps and security policies and controls, to your point, like people want to work a certain way and they're most productive a certain way, whether that be on a Mac or on a Windows or on a Linux device, or they want to use iMessage or they want to use Slack. We as admins now need to figure out a way to allow them to have that. I think, me personally, maybe I'm wrong, everyone, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the school of thought of like everyone has to use the exact same thing all the time. This is your machine. This is your model number. This is what you have to use. This is your software. Everyone's exactly the same. I think those days are, I would want to say, I'd hope over, but if not over, definitely on the way out. Because I think we need to find ways to allow people to do work and do it better. So my personal opinion, maybe I'm wrong. throw it in the chat and say, Ben, you're wrong. I don't care. Go for it. Cool. So after, did you have any hurdles with getting buy-in from certain groups within your organization? Did you have to have those one-on-one conversations with certain groups as to why this is important or why this is required or why we're moving in this direction and what the reservations were?
Not necessarily. We definitely were sensitive to making sure that whatever MDM we went with wasn't going to potentially break our local dev environments with our developers and engineers. And, we ran into a couple of small issues along the way, which, of course, caused that group or department of individuals to not be very happy with JumpCloud, but we were able to figure out a permanent Band-Aid for kind of our locally built dev environments that seems to be, working just fine to this day, as long as they do these 3 steps.
Yeah. I think you can hear what those were, because I know this is a JumpCloud event, but I know that not every implementation is going to be smooth sailing. What went wrong, Kyle? What went wrong in the whole process? It had
to do with local keychain password issues. So when you do the account takeover process on a Mac, when you're doing that with an existing user and you're binding their JumpCloud account down to their existing local account, they essentially need to log, once it's initiated on an admin side, they have to log out of their machine and then log back in. And when they log back in, they see 2 password fields. They have to enter their old local computer password and then their JumpCloud password, and they're done. But with this process, it apparently wasn't updating the keychain stored password within our locally built application. And this is like a homegrown dev app that helps us build and publish websites. So it wasn't doing it there. So they would need to go into their keychain settings and manually update the password to match what their computer password was. So that was probably more of an us problem. Might have been a little on JumpCloud. I don't know. But we luckily have a very smart group of engineers here who were able to figure that out after we did the first few binds, and then people were like, what's going on? Why can't I do this? Which is why it's super important to make sure that you test things with users in different departments before you do a massive deployment of an MDM software, whether that be JumpCloud or Jamf or whatever it is that you decide to move forward with. It's important to make sure you do testing with different departments who use different pieces of software.
Yeah. I remember doing that when we launched pretty much anything organizationally wide. It was, let's get a sample bed of users, right? Some from accounting, some from DevOps or from development, some from here, some from there, and different machines and different equipment. So that way we kind of get a good idea as to what those issues were, and then can solve them before we hit the send all button. Full send, let's go. But also, even then, I don't think we ever really did a full send. I think it was always like, we're going to full send in accounting because these are specific issues to that department. So we're going to do all of accounting today on Monday, and then the next day we're going to do all of this department. So that way you're not split between trying to solve the different individual concerns for each department. So
right.
That is definitely a great way of doing it. So we know where you came from. We know what you evaluated. We know some of the obstacles. What is your day-to-day now like, right, as an IT admin, now having, I'm assuming all of your systems are managed. Are they still being bought at Best Buy or wherever, or are they now Apple Business Manager? Are they DEP? Are they zero touch? What is your current quality of life as an IT admin as it comes to your organization?
That's a great question. So it was actually almost exactly a year ago. I got Apple Business Manager set up. with our organization, and we buy our Macs directly from Apple or CW. Right now with the chip shortage, whichever one can get us Macs the fastest. I kind of ping pong between them just to give them both business. But since we had bought all of our Macs prior to me showing up at Apple directly, they were actually able to do this awesome thing where they took all of our existing serial numbers that were purchased and our purchase history from Apple, and they made them available in Apple Business Manager. So I guess some of you are probably going, what is this guy talking about? What is Apple Business Manager? So what Apple Business Manager allows us to do in relation to our MDM, which is JumpCloud, is anytime we buy computers, whether that is from CW or Apple directly, when those computers ship, the serial numbers of those devices are actually married to the back end of our MDM, again, which is JumpCloud. So what happens is when those devices get turned on for the first time, and as soon as they connect to internet, which is like the third thing you do after you pick your language and your country, you get greeted with a little splash screen that says like, welcome to cars. And then you don't have any other option other than hitting continue. And then it installs JumpCloud for us, which having DEP put on devices now is more important than ever with Big Sur, because of the way that Apple is, as most of you may or may not know, is really big with like user permissions and making sure people, like end users, know what's going on and they're doing things. So what Apple Business Manager allows us to do is prove that says like, no, like Cars owns these computers, not the end users. So JumpCloud gets installed on the device before they even enter what they want the username to be on the device. So that way, as soon as that happens, that device pops up as an active device in JumpCloud. So that way, as soon as we get into the desktop, we just push our onboarding script, and then it, installs some basic apps, a local admin account, our endpoint protection software. And that's especially come in handy in a remote environment because the people who think they're smart that want to try to keep the device after they end their employment, who might be able to figure out how to get wipe the device and get past like a certain security screen or something. As soon as they wipe that device and connect it to the internet, what are they greeted with? Welcome to Cars. And the device just pops right back into JumpCloud as an active device. So that's especially important now, but also, JumpCloud gives us the capability to firmware lock a hard drive on Macs specifically, which turns the computer into a paperweight. I mean, you really can't get into that thing unless you know the PIN. I tried to brute force it way back when we were testing, and I could not get in.
Yeah, that's awesome. So your onboarding is a lot smoother for Mac. What about Windows? Because I know one of the things that JumpCloud is lacking, right, and then for better or for worse, and there's some technical reasons behind that, is zero touch for Windows. And I know that right now the standard for that is autopilot, right? And I think Microsoft did a pretty good job with autopilot and Intune and bringing those machines in. Maybe someday we'll have a way to do that. But for you, I know you have a subset of users. What does that look like as far as onboarding a Windows device? Is it a light touch? Do you install the agent and then ship it? Or how are you handling that from a logistics standpoint?
We are still doing imaging with Windows machines. So, we try to make a fresh image every 6 months or so. And then once that device is set up from that image, all we really need to do is just install the JumpCloud client on it and then bind the user down to the device. And so with that being said, it's a pretty simple process to get our Windows machines up and running. I'm biased because I'm a Mac guy. I think the Mac process is a little bit easier. But as it stands right now, we don't really have like a onboarding script for our Windows computers since we're just, restoring them from an image. But I hope someday we can kind of align those onboarding processes a little bit for Mac and Windows.
That'd be huge. And I think if anybody else feels, if they're a JumpCloud customer that's currently here, if you would like to see zero touch for Windows, I tell you, it's definitely something that we've been talking about and trying to figure out internally. But throw a feature request out there if you can do that, or send us an email or whatever the case is, and we'll be happy to make sure that gets logged in. So I use Smart Deploy for Windows imaging and have a automated script that runs afterward to install JumpCloud. Is so helpful. Aaron, I would love to have that. If you can hit me on Slack Lounge, I would love to have a look at that and see how that works. Because I think that if we can come together as a community and share best practices on those types of things, that's how we can work better and easier instead of banging our heads against the wall. Because that's one thing I like about JumpCloud is that we're not on the island, right? We have help. We people are here to walk you through it. So for your end users now, Kyle, what's the general sense and the feeling? Because I remember when I was an IT admin, I would get an email we would send them an email like, how was your onboarding experience, right? We wanted to gauge like the employee sense, and I had a Pipefy set up, and I literally went step by step with everyone for onboarding. That was our onboarding. It was a manual, like step by step process. But even with that, it was like I was getting people saying, "Oh my God, that was the best onboarding experience I've ever had at any company," right? And I think it was procedural, and it just went through and it was done within an hour. It was still a long period of time. But what do you feel like your current end users? Do you collect that data, or do you get a general sense that they really enjoy the onboarding? Do they really think that it's clean and easy and smooth for people who aren't very computer savvy? Or do you still get people who are like, this is too complicated, I can't figure it out, I don't know what to do, stuff like that?
We get people with all different types of tech knowledge that come into the organization. Although we are a company that primarily builds websites, that does not necessarily mean that everybody is like a computer science geek. We have people that do all sorts of things at the organization that are not specific to building websites. So with that being said, every Monday I do a onboarding like a 90-minute tech onboarding presentation. Pretty much right after like the company culture presentation. So whether you're a cars.com or a Dealer Inspire employee, everyone's in the same Zoom. So I go over helping people reset their passwords, making sure they're aware of like how to log into SSO applications. I go over things like what the core company software is, and like just a high level overview of like what some of these things are, because a lot of people, they've never heard of like Jira or Confluence or LastPass. I hope everyone and their grandma has heard of Zoom by now. And kind of getting people acclimated with like just our internal tools. And we find that that's a huge help. We also, our team created a like 20-minute tips and tricks video for getting the most out of your Mac or Windows machine. So that's showing them like basic things on the computer that are useful to know. But we're talking like, using two fingers on a Mac to right click. Or if you don't like that, you can hold down the control key and that's a right click. I mean, we're talking basic stuff like that to some more like advanced things that might help them get through their day. I do feel like we don't like poll new hires on that presentation specifically, but I do feel like it helps, especially with like the number of like basic IT tickets we would get. if I didn't do that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like you get those, what I call the and then tickets? So like I remember I would onboard somebody, and the next day it was like, oh, and I also need this. Oh, and I also need this, and also I need this. And it was like 3 subsequent tickets for. Do you get less of that, or do you get the same amount of number, or?
I mean, I'd say I'd say we don't get too many of those. The problem right now that we're having as far as like onboarding people is trying to figure out what kind of software licenses that are specific to their role that they need before they start, and also like what email distro lists they should be added to before they start. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that happens like in the HR and hiring manager step of like making sure they do their due diligence, that when we get our onboarding ticket, we have all that information ready to go. Otherwise, normally day 1, day 2, their manager is going to put in a ticket that says, please add so-and-so to this email distro. Please give them a whatever, gotcha, Microsoft license. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I think that your webinar that you're doing is fantastic, and the fact that you created some videos for people to get the most out of your Mac. I did post in the chat for anybody who is looking for resources for your end users. If you would like to join, go take a look at that. That's at JumpCloud University, JumpCloud for end users. In case you're not able to create those types of videos or to have those one-on-one conversations, this is a fantastic resource as well that you can use to send to your end users to kind of help them understand what their technology is doing for them. So awesome. So now you're in an environment where you have JumpCloud in place, you have smooth onboarding, smooth setup. Your users are using SSO. Are you using Radius or not? I'm not too sure. Did you go down?
We have Radius like Wi-Fi authentication in our offices set up.
Okay, perfect. So pretty much everything is being managed by JumpCloud. How often do you have to keep your finger on the pulse on day to day? Is it like one of those things where you have to constantly monitor something, or you just kind of as things happen?
What do you mean? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more? Like finger on the pulse of like how people are doing in the organization?
Like, do you live in a JumpCloud admin panel, or do you just kind of go in there when you need to go do something?
Oh, I have that tab open all day. just in case I need to do something, or push a piece of updated version of a piece of software to somebody's machine really quick or something like that. I get a lot of joy out of helping people still, as somebody who oversees the support staff for the organization. Yeah, that's really their job, but I still try to jump in and take tickets pretty frequently, just because I get a little adrenaline rush out of making people happy and getting them up and running with whatever they need as soon as possible.
That's awesome. So we talked a lot about the overall arcing experience of where you're at right now. What's next? What do you wish that you had at your disposal? And this is not a JumpCloud like feature request thing, but like outside of just
come on.
I mean, you can go for it. This is going to probably be posted on YouTube, so that's fantastic. But what are you at this point on this date, August 27th, 2021? What's the next iteration for you as an admin that you're considering right now? And if that's with JumpCloud, like what do you wish that the JumpCloud product can do for you, or what are you supplementing to make up for that, or thinking about supplementing?
Personally, I'm a big Apple nerd, so I'm really looking forward to Apple putting their little M1 next iteration of their M1 chip in their MacBook Pro line. Just because right now we send out 2 different types of computers. We send out pretty much like a souped up MacBook Air and M1, which is what I've been using for almost a year now. It's hands down my favorite Apple computer. So with the Intel machines, our onboarding and computer setup process is different with that because it's an Intel chip. So it slows us down whenever we have to set up a Intel Mac, whereas the setup and provisioning of an M1 computer is like I don't know, 4 times faster, maybe more. So I'm personally looking forward to whenever they decide to put their M1X, M2 chip in MacBook Pro line. But I'm also, since I know that JumpCloud is awesome about listening to customer feedback, I've already put in these feature requests, but we are still personally not using zero touch deployment for JumpCloud. And one of the main reasons behind that is because we're waiting for you all to have the ability to auto run a command or a script when they hit that desktop. Because what our fear is that when they make it into their desktop, they, all of a sudden they don't have their favorite web browser available to them or their favorite video chat tool. And what might end up happening is, depending on the technical skill set of that end user, is they could download a version of that application that maybe comes with some malware. So having our endpoint security protection software on these computers before they even open them is an absolute requirement for us. So the day that we can have it set to auto run a command or a script on the back end, they make it, they set their password and they log in and they get a little message that says go grab a cup of coffee and come back in 3 minutes, and you'll have Zoom, Slack, Chrome on their machine. And then little do they know they'll have some other goodies on the back end. So something like that is going to be awesome. And then also the other thing we're looking forward to that hopefully JumpCloud has on their super secret, top secret roadmap is the ability to sort computers, auto sort them into maybe some kind of smart group by operating system type. Because we do have an endpoint security software that is finicky with different versions of Mac OS. Having a way to auto sort by smart groups or whatever you guys decide to call it would be key for us, because we could very, very quickly, say, cool, anybody running 10.15.7, we're going to push out this version of our endpoint security software. Whereas right now, that is a extremely tedious and manual process. So those are I'm the guy that attends all your roadmap webinars, and I'm sitting there. It's almost as exciting as an Apple keynote day for me.
Oh, one day I'm going to get that big.
Where I go, oh, cool, they're going to add the ability to, do a time suspension for a user. Now my team doesn't have to sit on their computers at 5 p.m. on a Friday and start offboarding.
You made my eye twitch when you said that.
Shout out to my team, Anna, Edgar, Johnny. I know some of you are on. You guys all kick ass. I love you.
That's awesome. The whole team showed up. Yeah, I remember 4:45 on a Friday. HR director comes up. I was the IT manager. I sent my team home because I was whatever, 15 minutes early. Have a good, enjoy your weekend, right? 4:45 on a Friday, HR director comes up and says, "Hey, we're doing a high profile termination, right now." Okay, so there I am until 6 o'clock on a Friday night, deprovisioning all of their accounts and making sure that everything is set up. And then I had to change the Wi-Fi password because it was a high profile person and we weren't centralized like that. So then Monday morning, I was like, "Hey team, guess what? We got to make sure everyone has a new Wi-Fi password." Glad you had a good weekend. So, hey, that takes us right up to the 12:30. That was a wonderful talk. I appreciate your time, Kyle. I appreciate you hanging out and just chit-chatting and giving me a rundown on your experience. And obviously the feedback on JumpCloud is great, but then also just talking technical perspective is fantastic as well. And I hope that anybody who was listening that has been in that seat before, where they've taken over an environment that's decentralized and unmanaged, JumpCloud may or may not be the right solution for you. But whatever that solution is, I hope that you took something out of this conversation that says, it's all about the planning. It's all about the execution. It's all about having a clear direction, and that would get you to the right place. And also finding a community, finding other people that can help. Because one thing I like about being in the IT world is that there really isn't, maybe it's just limited, but there really isn't very many egos in the IT world, right? Where my experience have always been that IT admins love to help and share other IT admins with knowledge and skills. So always look for that whenever you decide to go in any direction. So, hey, everyone, thank you for coming in. Have a wonderful weekend. We will be back here in 2 weeks for another IT hour. So stay tuned to that. And I believe this video at some point will be on our YouTube. So yeah, watch that. And then also join the lounge. I think it's here. I don't know where it's at, but join the lounge if you haven't done so already. So thanks, everyone. Take care. Cheers.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.